Age Contrived is billed as a competitive strategy game of engine building and fantasy gods, and is the first title from fledgling studio Bellows Intent. This game is one of the hottest tabletop crowdfunding campaigns running right now, and is racking up the stretch goals. I've got Chris Matthews here with me, the designer and project lead for the game, and he's going to give us the goods on An Age Contrived. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing great, Mike. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in, shall we? So, just to start off, tell us a bit about the game. If someone who hasn't seen the Kickstarter yet, or hasn't seen any of the coverage about the game yet, what is An Age Contrived?
Yeah, well, like you said, An Age Contrived is a fantasy Euro game of engine building and fantasy gods. Um, so as a Euro game, we're competing to score the most points. It's a competitive game. It's not cooperative, but it's very friendly competition in this game. It kind of borrows those typical Euro design principles of positive player interaction. There's not that much luck involved. So we're not fighting each other directly. We're just indirectly competing to score the most points. And then most points at the end wins. And yeah, that's about it. So, there's lots of different aspects that we could go into, whether that's kind of presentation, theme, mechanics, gameplay, all of that stuff. But that's just a little overview.
So, what inspired you to make An Age Contrived?
Uh, well, I'd say that to answer that properly, I'd have to go back a little bit into my own history. So I started off in board games working in the manufacturing side of the business. I started in 2011 at a company called Panda Game Manufacturing. They're one of the larger manufacturers of board games in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So I got to work on the production of a lot of great titles that have come out the last 10 years or so. And as I did, I was kind of inspired to try to innovate in board game production in new ways. And at the same time, I've always had a deep love of strategy board games of different styles. Euro games is one of the styles that I love, and I was always inspired to design as well. So I tried to combine both that experience in manufacturing and that passion for kind of Euro game design ethos, and bring those passions to life with this first game under this new studio.
Nice, nice. From what I understand, uh, Panda, like they're the biggest kind of people, the biggest company that people outsource like game production and component design to. Would that be a correct characterization?
Yeah, it would. I'm not sure if they're the biggest. I think they're probably not, but I think that in the realm of manufacturing in China, when it comes to board games, they are
Mm.
like one of, if not the biggest. And they're definitely one of the most present in the industry. They try to have like a lot of community involvement, a lot of outreach, and try to be very accessible. Because for kind of like new board game publishers like me, getting started in manufacturing is really intimidating. So it helps to have that kind of like friendly, approachable style, I guess.
Nice, nice. So, so you kind of came at it from like you've been in the business, you've seen what other companies have been doing, and you got the itch to like make something of your own. That doesn't really kind of touch on what I think is one of the more interesting aspects of the game, which is the lore. Eldrinir, the gods who rule over it, all of the different monuments. Talk to us a little bit about that and like how you guys came up with that.
Sure. Oh man, how we came up with it. Well, we had a few inspirations. I think a lot of it came from the artist of the game herself. She is someone who does a lot of fantasy illustrations of different styles. She's a very big Tolkien fan.
Nice.
Does a lot of like Tolkien works for kind of private collectors. So she brought a lot of ideas to the table, and then we were also inspired by if you've ever heard of this series by Neil Gaiman, American Gods, where
Oh yeah.
where the gods are only as powerful as the mortals believe
Got
they
the
are. Yeah, there you go on the
full
shelf behind
Sandman
you.
right there on the shelf. Yeah, big fan of Neil Gaiman. American Gods is great. Um, that's cool. I didn't. I'm surprised that I didn't catch that, but I guess American Gods is so modern, and you just kind of took some of those core ideas of the gods and applied them in a fantasy setting. I
Yeah,
never saw that. That's pretty cool.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, so we tried to build a world because we didn't really, we wanted to build a game in a world here that was very friendly, where no one was battling each other. There was no violence involved, and not that there's anything wrong with games like that. Like I love battling games as well, but it just wasn't the style that we wanted to do for this initial one. We wanted to try to like invite as many different types of players to the table as we could, and we didn't want violence or too direct conflict to put anyone off. Just what we were trying to do with this game. So that kind of theme fit really well here, because what that allowed us to do is have this pantheon of gods where each player takes on the role of one god that's ruling over a mortal world. But we're not fighting each other as gods, nor are we really abusing the mortals of this world in any way. We're trying, in fact, to build them up, because the more flourishing their civilization becomes, then the better that we are doing as a pantheon, the more stability we have, because we are ultimately only as powerful as they believe we are. So that's kind of like where that whole like meshing of those things came from, I guess.
Nice, nice. Well, it's very beautifully rendered by your artist for sure, and it's definitely. I think it's one of the things that makes the game really stand out. Is it really does kind of feel like a very realized kind of environment, a very realized world that does have it isn't just like a theme with that's very separate from the mechanics. The mechanics and the theme are pretty tightly integrated, in my opinion.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I've heard differing opinions on that, honestly. Like, I think a lot of people, such as yourself, if I'm understanding correctly, like do find that those things mesh quite well. I think people coming from more like of a thematic game background, if that's more what they're looking for in games like um, I don't know, Arkham Horror, the card game, or
Right.
stuff like that. I think it's more mechanically driven than it is thematically driven. Like, we're not going to
Mhm.
encounter those huge story beats within the game experience itself. That may be something it is something that we would like to introduce more of in expansions, but we kind of hit our complexity budget of what we thought was reasonable to put in front of players for this first game. So we didn't want to ask too much of them. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that you still found a good mesh there.
Well, I mean, you find a lot of a lot of Euro games, especially that have a very kind of thin, occasionally even just gratuitous theme, where it's really just all about the mechanics. But this felt a lot more balanced to me. So
Nice.
um, now, An Age Contrived is striking at first glance, largely due to the components and table presence. When playing the game, I realized that component quality and how components work mechanically was clearly a priority in your design. Tell us a bit about your approach to components in the game.
Sure. Well, when I was designing the game, for me, obviously gameplay comes first. Like, if you have a game that where the mechanics of it aren't really compelling, then like that's kind of like the core thrust of the medium in and of itself. So that's key. But beyond that, I wanted every turn that players took in this game to be tactile. So in a sense, I kind of like put components second and put them like at a level that was really informing some of the game's key like design decisions that I was making along the way. So I tried to do that in a couple ways. One is by just limiting the number of physical resources that are involved in the game. So like different types of components. A lot of games they'll have like 5 different resources. Like if we think of Catan, there's like sheep, brick, or sheep, clay, like what wood, whatever's included in Catan.
Right.
In this one, there's just a single resource, and that was a pretty intentional decision because by focusing on just one, I could make that one as like awesome as it could be. So in this particular game, what all of the players are working with as their one resource are like these little tiles that are very reminiscent of the game Azul, if you've ever played that, and they
Right.
feels really nice to have a bunch of them in your hand. They like kind of make that tactile click clack. Um,
You want to pop it
and
in your mouth and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I actually they what is it? They just came out with a chocolate version of, or a chocolatiers version of Azul. I'm like, that is way too dangerous in my house. Someone's going to mistake that and they're going to crack their teeth. I do love those tiles. Those tiles are great, and I actually think that I like the way you handled it, where you say they're one resource, but there's actually like little there are subcategories within that resource with the different energy types, right? The different designs that are on the tiles. So that I don't think you could do that if you had like five other resources. I think that would be much harder to get away with and add way too much to the complexity. But having those designs on the tiles and having the abilities trigger during the game, I don't know. It kind of gives you that little endorphin rush uh,
Yeah.
when it happens. You're like, oh, I can move this somewhere else, or I can put this back on my. That's pretty cool. I like the way you did that.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's meant to give some feel good moments to players. And then the other thing I'd say on the component aspect is I was inspired by a couple other games that have great visual progressions from the beginning of the game to the end. And what I mean by that, a visual progression, is that at the beginning of the game, the board is bare. It's kind of just like in a fledgling or empty state. And then by the end of the game, through the course of the actions that all players are taking, something gets developed there, something gets built up. And what I wanted to do is try to tackle that in a 3D way that was both visually and tactilely satisfying. So in the game, there are these monuments that are being constructed by the players kind of jointly. And those monuments are these cardboard pieces, but they're magnetic cardboard. So inside each cardboard panel is a little magnet embedded. And piece by piece, you construct these to create these like three-dimensional monuments. And that's one other like aspect of the game that I think from what I hear from players is like quite satisfying, quite unique, quite tactile. Just feels good when you do it, and you get to do that a bunch of times throughout the game. It's not just once. So I think that worked out pretty well too.
It was definitely one of the first things that caught my eye about the game, which is why we wanted to talk to you at PAX Unplugged. Um, it's I've never seen anything like it in a game. I think, I mean, there are games where you do build things and increase the presence on the table, but I don't think anyone has gone quite as vertical as you have. And I was also I was also intrigued by how in their unbuilt state they magnetically stick together, and then you place them on the board, and they are actually places to allocate energy tokens to. That it I wasn't expecting that. That was super cool, and it made the whole building process for a player really engaging. And when we would play a turn and someone would finish off a side of the building, um, and someone just reached over and put it on the metal structure on the board to like let it snap on there. If it wasn't the person that completed it, they were like, "No, you put that back. I want to do that."
Yeah, exactly.
So, uh, yes, there's something really satisfying about building those structures, and I would say the my only critique is that everybody appears to rush to build those to get that experience of like picking that up and putting it on there when it might be happening a little too soon in the game sometimes. But that's a quibble. It's a quibble. It could just be like everybody's
Yeah,
just
that no, that's
wanting to give it a
fair.
shot,
I
you
think
know?
yeah, the
It's like that
yeah,
and
yeah, sure.
buying the tiles for your conveyor belt for your machine on your tableau. Um, those always get gobbled up real quick too. But now, a main topic I've noticed in your updates on the Kickstarter is customization. You're offering multiple skins for player boards or even monogrammed game boxes. And this is pretty atypical for board games. What gave you the idea to offer these things, and how have people responded?
Uh, yeah. Well, I have always been inspired by other hobbies, other kind of industries outside of board games. And I think that a lot of other mediums offer a lot of cool innovations that aren't always like ported over to well to board games or to other adjacent kind of spaces. Um, in this example, particularly, we're talking about kind of personalization and customization. I've been inspired by what happens in the video game space, where in League of Legends, where you can shop for just the right skin that you want for whatever champion you're playing, and you can really customize that to represent yourself as a player. And it has no in-game impact at all, but it helps
Mm-hmm.
you express yourself. And that's not something that matters to all players, but for the players for whom it does matter, well, that's like really quite meaningful to them. Um, Similarly, I got married a few years ago, and I was like buying a suit for the first time in like forever. And I was shopping for one, and I went to this one shop locally to me here, and they made every suit custom made. And because they did so, they were able to offer all of these personalization options. You could choose your liner, you could choose your monogram, you could choose like what sort of lapel you want. They had like 11 different types of personalization. You could get exactly like the suit that you wanted, and it was really affordable. Um, and I started asking myself, like, wow, like, why couldn't this idea be implemented in board games, which is the space that I'm most passionate about? And so at the time, I was still working at Panda, and I started looking into this and started figuring out, like, well, what would be needed to implement this sort of personalization in the board game space? And it wasn't that ridiculous of like a feature or an idea, I guess, to try to implement. Like it's complex for sure, but it's not rocket science. So it was from those kind of experiences, I guess, in other aspects of my life that I thought, like, well, let's try to bring some of these ideas into board games, and let's just see if board gamers may appreciate them. Now, I don't know if I fully know the answer to that yet. I know that just based on the Kickstarter and how it's gone so far, and it's hasn't been, it's like this idea has only been at the forefront of backers' minds since the Kickstarter launched, like less than 2 weeks ago. I'd say it's been received really positively by a lot of backers. I haven't seen anyone say that like this is something that like annoys them or upsets them in any way, but I have, and I expected to hear that for some people it just doesn't matter, and
Yeah.
that's totally fine. But I'm hoping that for those people who are excited about it, for whom it may matter, that I can deliver like a really wonderful experience for them, that they can actually personalize their game in just the way that they want, and then receive that in the mail a few months down the line, and have some satisfaction that like, well, they were a part of this journey, and they got to make something that is theirs alone and theirs forever. Um, and it'll be a game that hopefully they can be proud to own and keep on their shelf and take out and play for years to come.
Well, and also there's always been that friction between players who like aesthetic and like go for the deluxe components and the metal coins and all of that, and then the people that think all of that is just pointless and it's just about the mechanics and how good the game is, and if it's a good game, it doesn't need that. Like I I could see it. I could see that coming to a head if it was. It seems fairly aesthetic, cosmetic in nature, and just like a nice thing to have. Um, but I'm not sure if I see it like really kind of engaging people like for instance people who complain about Kickstarters having tons of minis, right? There's that subgroup of game player out there. Personally, I'm a designer at heart, so I'm all for it.
Sure.
I think it's great. I am the kind of person that gets the metal coins and paints minis and that sort of thing. So I think it's great. I'd love to see more of it.
Yeah,
I'd
me
like to
too.
see. I'd like to see. I'd actually like to see more meaningful customization, which seems like a tall order for something like Age Contrived, where you're trying to achieve balance. But I think in a game like, for instance, Unmatched, where you're not really terribly worried about balance in the first place, you could really kind of get some custom things going for a
Yeah,
property like that.
I think that is the much more exciting and interesting kind of application of the idea of personalization in games.
Hmm.
Um, I and yeah, I would love to see that explored, and I intend to explore that myself
Yeah,
with future games under this studio. I intentionally tried to keep personalization just cosmetic for this first game that we're
right,
launching just as like a proof of concept. Um, I I like even as I grappled with the idea of like, oh well, what could we do with gameplay, and like what could we offer in terms of gameplay for personalization, like as a even as a designer, I was like kind of overwhelmed with all of the possibilities. So
yeah,
I thought like, well, let's just keep it simple. Let's just do something cosmetic. And then when we deliver on that at the end of the Kickstarter, we'll be able to show kind of the industry. There'll be this proof case study that like this kind of thing
right.
is possible. Like yeah, sure, it's a little difficult, but like it's not outside of the realm of possibility here. We can create cool experiences for gamers. So let's try to take that further and like do something even with the game design itself that allows for personalization.
I have a feeling we may have already answered this, but what would you say makes your Kickstarter stand out from other tabletop campaigns running right now?
Um, Running right now, I I think maybe just more broadly speaking, I'd say it's I mean the artist did a fantastic job. Like the presentation
Mhm.
is really quite good. The graphic designer as well. But I think that the components that are being put forth here are, like we've talked about, simply different from anything else that's been seen in board games before.
Mhm.
Whether it's like those magnetic monuments that players are building that we talked about, or the personalization aspect that we've talked about now, or there are also like these metal mechanical player boards that can come with one of the like more deluxe versions of the game, which are like something else that is also a bit of an experiment and like a
Mhm.
tactile fun thing that like you don't absolutely need to have, but for players who like that bit of toy factor in their games, it's kind of put there for them. so so yeah, I'd say those like component beats are something that um, if you talk about standing out, I think that those are I haven't seen those in other games before.
Mhm. Um, yeah, I mean the highest end tier for the all the bells and whistles version of the game is was only $119, which is I, I would say that's on the low end compared to a lot of Kickstarters I've seen that have had the level of quality of components that that you're showing and I realize it's kind of hard to see it on the screen with the Kickstarter, but like having seen them physically, like the spot UV finish on the board, the just the attention to detail on all of the components and the again the monuments. Um, that's it's pretty impressive. But you've got stretch goals, and the stretch goals keep racking up. And currently, there's only three goals left to be unlocked that I could see. And I would say it's possible for the campaign to blow past them, especially with like a last minute push, like a lot of good Kickstarters like yours tend to have. Um, will you roll out additional stretch goals if you get to that point? Do you have anything in mind?
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we try to not reveal everything that we could possibly reveal.
Yeah.
And the main reason for that is so that we can have some flexibility for the campaign itself and the backers who are involved to have input on what gets developed or what gets included in the game. Because,
Okay.
as the like designer and project lead and like the team that I work with, we know what we would love to see for stretch goals, but ultimately we're kind of in a bubble of our own, right? And we may not
Right.
think outside the box in the ways that some backers might. And we've already seen some like awesome ideas from backers that we've like implemented in the
Oh,
2 weeks that
okay.
the campaign has been online. So we
Nice.
want to leave the flexibility for backers to come up with their own suggestions, and for us as quickly as possible to evaluate like, oh well, can we do that? Like, is that a good idea? Will that like affect the game experience in other unintended ways or something like that? And then see if we can roll them out. So to answer your question, yes, we have more stretch goals planned if we do hit them. Um, but yeah, we're also trying to like work on backer ideas to not like spoil all of those from the start, and kind of see what we can do to give backers the best experience we can.
Do you have an example of something that you put into the game in the last 2 weeks based on feedback that you got?
Yeah. The thing that we were able to hear from backers and implement the fastest was on that personalization aspect of the project. Um, we've got this online visualization tool that we made available. So you can go and use this tool. It's like a little web app where you can choose how you want the liner of your box to look. So you can choose from like
Oh,
one of 10 different cosmetic themes. You can choose like if you want to show a character or not, if you want a monogram or not. So, you could go in there, Mike, and say like, you could write in like, oh, this is Mike Dunn's game. Like you could just write your name. You could write like a gamer tag. If you have a quote that you want to include, you could write that. Like it's totally up to you. And backers said like, oh, this is cool, but like what you've presented is cool, but like what if we had a theme, just a cosmetic theme that was one that incorporated all of the characters, or one that went in this direction? And what if you enabled limited numbering for it? You've seen a number of games over the years have
hmm.
like, oh, number one out of
Yeah. Launch
5,000.
edition. Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
That
exactly. And
sort of
we didn't
thing.
think to include that initially because we thought that like full customization was maybe a bit more meaningful. But then, backers, I think very correctly brought up that like, well, like, why aren't we? Like, you could do that as well. So those ideas in particular, kind of additional personalization options and then limited numbering, those were things we were able to like hear and implement very quickly. And fortunately for those ones, we didn't even have to make them stretch goals. We could just talk with our graphic designer and software developer and get confirmation of like, yeah, this is something we can do, and there's not that much work involved. So let's just do it. Let's just like let backers decide if they want us to do it, and they decided yes. So we're going to do it.
Well, and it occurs to me, I imagine you guys have some ideas for expansion down the road, if depending on how successful An Age Contrived is, even beyond the Kickstarter, because I'm assuming you'll end up in retail at some point, or at least that would be a goal. Um, am I correct in assuming that?
It's certainly a goal. Yes,
All right,
we
cool.
yeah, it's certainly a goal. We don't have a path to retail right now, but if the um, I'm kind of still a rookie in that side of the industry. I think if the Kickstarter goes well and we can generate some interest from from distribution and retail in a way that doesn't make us kind of compromise on what we're trying to deliver to backers, who are the ones who have made this project possible in the first place, then I would love to get the game into retail. So I'm going to be working the hardest I can to try to make that happen. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and I imagine an expansion. Hypothetically here, I'm speaking hypothetically here. An expansion might be a good place to explore even more meaningful customization and personalization ideas, right? Like because for most people buying an expansion, they've already bought and or played the core game, and they might have ideas of how they would like to personalize it. Whereas it might be a little hard to think of something beyond just like monogrammed or something like that for a fresh new property like this.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that like just like how backers already gave feedback that helped us think outside of our own bubble in terms of like the cosmetic personalization that we've got, I think
Mm-hmm.
they'll also help us think outside of that bubble in terms of like game design and we do have plans for expansions. So I think that yeah, I think Mike, I have you to thank for the for the concept of kind of marrying expansions with potential gameplay personalization. That sounds extremely cool.
I mean, you can't take the nerdy designer out of me. I used to do that professionally for years, not game design, but just design and coming up with stuff like that. So I have a tendency to just like spitball when I do these things.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, awesome, Chris. So, I mean, at this point, you're funded and then some, and I think I believe you're barreling towards the 400,000 mark. You're getting inching your way there. Um, what uh, what are your plans for the rest of the year after this Kickstarter is done? Obviously, you'll be working on the game and working to get a final version of the game to backers, but we're just starting to like peer around the corner at convention season. Are you going to be showing off An Age Contrived to anyone at any of the big cons this year?
I think so. Yeah, I have plans to attend Gamma at the end of April here, and that is really with the goal of trying to get the game into retail the best that I can, as kind of a retail focused and distribution focused show. And then I'll be bringing it to Gen Con as well. Not with a booth, unfortunately, but probably just walking around, demoing, like maybe running some open gaming at whatever opportunity that I can. Otherwise, for the rest of the year, I'll just be focused on executing for backers. We're trying to deliver on a relatively short time frame, like especially by Kickstarter standards, which are, in my opinion, kind of like unreasonably long these days,
Right.
asking a little too much of backers across the board. But and then whatever extra capacity we have, I think we'll be turning towards the next projects, including the first major expansion for An Age Contrived, as well as like the second game under this studio.
Nice. It's good to hear that you've got plans for other games. You can definitely hear it in the tone on the Bellows Intent website. You guys got big plans. It's and based on what we're seeing from Age Contrived, I'm looking forward to what you guys are cooking up. So, well,
Yeah, thanks,
awesome,
Mike.
Chris. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for talking with me tonight. And um, if you haven't pledged for An Age Contrived yet, you should go right over the Kickstarter. We'll put the link somewhere on the screen for you, and you can go right over there and do what I did: pledge for the Founders Edition because I got to have everything. Anyway, thanks again, Chris, and we'll probably see you at Gamma.
Awesome. Thanks for hosting, Mike. And yeah, we'll see you there.